Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The old screen door creaked behind me, a sound as familiar and comforting as the scent of pine needles and damp earth that always hung in the air up here at the lake house. It was late, well past midnight, and the rest of the family had long since turned in. All the lights in the sprawling cabin were out, save for the dim orange glow from the embers in the big stone fireplace in the main room and the soft, silvery moonlight filtering through the tall pines, casting long, dancing shadows across the wide wooden porch. I'd always loved this time of night, the quiet stillness after a day full of family chaos, laughter, arguments over card games, the distant buzz of my nephew's jet ski out on the water. It was a good chaos, the kind that filled a life, but sometimes a woman just needed a moment to hear herself think, you know. This year's annual family get-together felt a little different for me. Mark, my husband, had been distant. Not in a bad way, not angry or anything, just preoccupied. He'd taken on a big new project at work, the kind that eats at a man's mind even when he's supposed to be on vacation. I missed our easy rhythm, the comfortable silences, the way he'd just know what I was thinking with a single glance. Tonight, after everyone had said their goodnights, I'd hoped for one of those quiet porch swing conversations with him, a chance to reconnect, to just feel his hand in mine and know we were still us. But he'd mumbled something about being tired and headed off to our room before I could even suggest it. So there I was, Angela, 48 years young, though tonight I felt a bit older, wandering onto the porch in my old chenille robe, the cool night air raising goosebumps on my arms. I hugged myself, looking out at the lake, a vast expanse of dark, shimmering water under the starry sky. A loon called out, its mournful cry echoing across the water, and it seemed to match the small ache in my own chest. I was just about to give up and head inside myself when I saw him. Or who I thought was him. Over at the far end of the porch, near the old wicker chase lounge where Mark sometimes liked to sit and look at the stars, a figure was standing, silhouetted against the faint moonlight. Same height as Mark, same broad shoulders I'd leaned on for 25 years. He had his back to me, looking out over the railing towards the dense woods that bordered the property. My heart gave a little leap. Maybe he hadn't gone to bed after all. Maybe he'd felt that same need for connection I did. I padded softly across the wooden planks, the old boards smooth and cool beneath my bare feet. He didn't turn as I approached, seemed lost in thought. That was so like Mark when he was working through a problem. I came up beside him, close enough to feel a faint warmth radiating from him, a familiar scent of wood smoke, and the faint, clean smell of the soap he used. Couldn't sleep either, huh? I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, not wanting to break the peaceful quiet too abruptly. I reached out, a familiar gesture, and laid my hand gently on his arm, expecting the comforting feel of his worn flannel shirt sleeve. My fingers brushed against a different texture, something softer, a finer knit. Odd, I thought fleetingly. Mark wasn't one for fancy sweaters, even on chilly nights. He stiffened almost imperceptibly at my touch, a tiny, fractional movement that I might have missed if I hadn't been so attuned to Mark's usual relaxed presence. But then he settled. He didn't pull away. He didn't speak. He just continued to gaze out at the dark woods. I leaned my head against his shoulder, a tired sigh escaping me. It felt good, solid. "It's beautiful out tonight, isn't it?" I said softly. Sometimes I think this is what heaven must look like. So peaceful. I paused, gathering my thoughts, the words I'd wanted to say to Mark earlier. "I've been a bit worried about you, honey. You seem so far away lately. With this new project and all, I miss you." My voice was a little shaky with emotion I hadn't realized was so close to the surface. I kept my eyes on the dark tree line, feeling vulnerable but also safe, assuming I was with my husband. The silence stretched for a moment, and I felt him take a slow, deep breath. I waited for him to turn, to put his arm around me, to say something reassuring. But he remained still, a quiet statue beside me. And then, very gently, a hand that wasn't Mark's, a hand that felt subtly different, larger, warmer, covered mine where it rested on his arm. My breath hitched. A sudden, cold wave washed over me, starting at my scalp and prickling all the way down to my toes. That wasn't Mark's hand. Mark's fingers were thicker, the knuckles more pronounced from years of weekend woodworking. This hand was smoother. And as that realization dawned, another followed with sickening clarity. The colon, it wasn't quite right either. Close, very close, because both brothers used scents from the same rugged outdoorsy line, but this had a slightly spicier note, one I associated with David. David, my brother-in-law, Mark's younger brother. My head snapped up. In the faint light, I could now make out his profile more clearly as he finally, slowly, turned his head to look down at me. His expression was unreadable in the shadows, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. How could I have made such a mistake? I just poured out my worries, leaned against him, sought comfort from him, thinking he was my husband, and he hadn't stopped me. He hadn't said a word. The silence that had felt companionable moments before now crackled with an entirely different kind of tension, an awkward, unnerving awareness that left me utterly speechless. My mind raced, replaying the last few minutes, the intimacy of my words, my touch. What must he be thinking? The cool night air suddenly felt suffocating. A flush of heat crept up my neck, embarrassment warring with a strange, unidentifiable flutter in my stomach. David's gaze wasn't accusatory, nor was it suggestive, not that I could discern in the dim light. It was quiet, attentive, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. I scrambled for words, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. David. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. I thought you were Mark. My voice was a hoarse whisper, full of mortification. He finally spoke, his voice low and calm, much quieter than Mark's usually booming tones. It's all right, Angela. Just that. No surprise, no teasing, no awkwardness in his tone at all. He didn't move his hand from mine immediately, and for a second I was too flustered to pull away. It rested there, a point of unexpected warmth. What? I leaned on you, I was saying. I stammered, feeling like a complete fool. My cheeks were burning now. How could the darkness, a similar build, and my own preoccupation have led to this? You were worried about Mark. He finished for me, his voice still quiet, but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. Understanding, perhaps. And you miss him. It's okay. He finally, slowly lifted his hand from mine, and I quickly pulled my own arm back, clutching it to my chest, as if to physically hold in my embarrassment. He went to bed. I mumbled, staring at the porch railing now, anywhere but at David's face. I saw you standing here, and it's dark, and we're about the same size, David said, a hint of a smile in his voice, though I couldn't see it. Happens all the time, especially from behind. He paused, then added, more seriously, he's been under a lot of pressure. That new hydroelectric project is a monster. He's been carrying it around for months. I nodded, still feeling awkward, but his calm acceptance was slowly diffusing my acute embarrassment. It was true. Mark had been consumed, and David, being an engineer himself, albeit in a different field, probably understood the pressures better than I did. "I know," I said softly. "I just wish he'd talk to me about it more. Or just be present when he's here, you know?" David was silent for a moment, and I risked a glance at him. He was looking out at the lake now, his profile thoughtful. "He's not always good at that," David said, his voice reflective. "Sharing the load, I mean. Especially when he thinks he needs to be the strong one." He turned his head slightly towards me again. "He internalizes. Always has since we were kids. Mom used to say he had a whole world in his head nobody else could see." It was a surprisingly intimate observation about his brother, about my husband. Something Mark himself had never quite articulated. I found myself listening, intrigued despite the lingering awkwardness. "He does, doesn't he?" I mused. "He's always been the rock. For me, for the kids, for his parents before they passed. And rocks don't usually talk about their own cracks, do they?" David said, a touch of melancholy in his tone. He shifted, leaning his hip against the railing. "Sometimes, Angela, the people who seem the strongest are the ones who need the most gentle handling, the most patience. They don't know how to ask for help, or even just for an ear." His words resonated deeply. It was true. I'd often felt I had to pry things out of Mark or wait for him to be ready. And maybe my worry tonight, my need for connection, had made me impatient. David's unexpected insight was like a balm. He wasn't making light of my mistake, nor was he making it a bigger deal than it was. He was just talking and listening. "I guess I haven't been very patient lately," I admitted, my voice small. "I've been focused on how his distance affects me." David made a soft sound. "That's natural, too. You're his wife. You're supposed to be his closest. Everything." He paused. "What you said earlier about missing him, he needs to hear that. But maybe not when he's already drowning in his own thoughts. Maybe when the waters are a little calmer for him." The way he said it, so simply, so devoid of judgment, made me feel understood. Not just by him, but it was as if he was offering a key to understanding Mark a little better too. The initial shock of my mistake was fading, replaced by a curious sort of comfort. Here was David, Mark's often quieter, more reserved younger brother, standing with me in the moonlight, offering a perspective I hadn't considered. The porch suddenly felt less like a stage for my embarrassment and more like a quiet confessional, a neutral space where an unexpected conversation was beginning to unfold. He hadn't stopped me, not just for my initial mistaken gesture, but he wasn't stopping this conversation either, this gentle exploration of the man we both, in our different ways, cared about. I took a breath, the cool night air feeling cleaner now, easier to draw in. "When did you get so wise, David?" I asked, a small smile finally touching my lips. It was a genuine question. I'd known him for over 25 years, but mostly as Mark's brother, the quieter counterpart at family gatherings, always polite, always pleasant, but rarely one for deep discussions, at least not with me. He chuckled softly, a warm, low sound that was surprisingly pleasant. "I've been listening for a long time, Angela. To Mark. To Mom and Dad when they were around. To my own life, I suppose." He pushed himself off the railing slightly, turning to face me more directly, though still keeping a comfortable distance. The moonlight caught his features a little more now, and I could see the kindness in his eyes, a kindness I'd perhaps overlooked or simply not had the occasion to witness so directly. "And sometimes," he added, his voice a bit more thoughtful, "it's easier to see things clearly when you're a little on the outside of a situation." "On the outside?" I echoed. "Well, I'm not in your marriage," he said, a gentle directness in his tone. I see Mark as my brother. I see his patterns, his strengths, his Markisms from a different angle. Just like you see sides of him I probably don't. It made perfect sense, and it was strangely comforting to have this third-party perspective, especially from someone who knew Mark so intimately in a familial way. "He's lucky to have you as a brother," I said, and I meant it. I realized in that moment that I'd rarely considered the depth of their bond, always seeing David as an extension of Mark's family, rather than a significant individual in his own right, with his own perceptions and feelings. "We've had our moments, like all brothers," David said, a reminiscent smile playing on his lips. "But yeah, at the end of the day, he's my brother. I'd do anything for him." He paused, then looked at me, his gaze steady and sincere. "And that includes wanting him to be happy. Wanting you both to be happy." There was an honesty in his words that touched me. No pretense, no platitudes, just a simple statement of care. The tension I'd felt earlier had completely dissolved, replaced by a surprising sense of ease, of genuine connection. It was as if the mistaken identity, the awkwardness, had somehow stripped away the usual layers of casual family interaction and allowed for something more real to surface. "Thank you, David," I said softly. That actually helps a lot. Hearing that perspective, I found myself wanting to talk more, to understand more. He's always been so driven. Even when we were first married, he was working crazy hours, trying to build his career. I admired it, his dedication. But sometimes I wondered if he ever just switched off. David nodded slowly. "That ambition, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's what makes him so successful, so capable. But it's also what can make him isolated." He looked out at the dark water again. "I remember when we were kids, he'd get obsessed with building these incredibly complex Lego castles. Hours he'd spend locked in his room. And they were amazing, truly. But if you tried to help, or even just talk to him while he was in the zone, he'd barely register you were there." A small laugh escaped me. "That sounds exactly like him with these engineering reports now. He calls it his bubble." "The bubble?" David repeated, nodding. "Yeah, that's a good word for it. The trick is, I think, knowing when the bubble needs a gentle poke and when it needs to be left alone to float for a bit." "And how do you tell the difference?" I asked, genuinely curious about his insight. He considered this for a moment, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I'm not sure there's a magic formula. Maybe it's about watching for the little signs. Is he just focused, or is he truly distressed? Is he shutting the world out because he needs to concentrate, or because he's overwhelmed and doesn't know how to say it?" He looked back at me. "You probably see those signs better than anyone, Angela. You live with him." His faith in my perception was a quiet gift. Maybe I did see the signs, but I'd been misinterpreting them lately, seeing them as a rejection of me rather than a symptom of his internal pressure. This conversation with David was like having a fog lift, allowing me to see the familiar landscape of my marriage with fresh eyes. It was an unexpected intimacy, this sharing of insights about a man we both loved, albeit in very different ways. And it had all sprung from a simple mistake in the dark, a moment of misidentification that could have been acutely embarrassing, but had instead turned into something meaningful. I realized I was no longer thinking about my earlier mortification. I was simply present in this quiet conversation under the stars, feeling a sense of gratitude for this unforeseen moment of connection with my brother-in-law, a man I was beginning to see in a whole new light. The loon called out again, its cry softer this time, more distant. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the tall pines, a soothing, whispering sound. The embers in the main room fireplace had probably died down to gray ash by now. "He's a good man," I said quietly, more to myself than to David, but I knew he heard. It was a reaffirmation, a reminder to my own heart. David nodded, his gaze still on the distant, dark water. "He is one of the best." There was a comfortable silence for a few moments, filled only by the sounds of the night. It wasn't the charged silence of earlier, nor the companionable silence I usually shared with Mark. It was something new, a quiet understanding that had settled between David and me. "You know," I began, a thought forming, "it's funny. We've been family for so long, but I don't think we've ever really talked like this." David turned his head, a soft smile on his face, more visible now as my eyes had fully adjusted to the darkness. "No, I don't think we have." His smile was gentle, a little shy even, but warm. "Mark's usually the one doing all the talking between us, isn't he?" I chuckled. "Or at least the louder talking." It was true. Mark was the more naturally extroverted of the two, the one who often held court at family dinners or steered conversations. David was more of an observer, thoughtful, interjecting with a dry, witty comment or a well-considered point when you least expected it. I realized how much I, and perhaps the rest of the family, had often let Mark's presence overshadow David's quieter one. "He fills a room, my brother," David acknowledged, without any hint of resentment, just a statement of fact. "Always has. It's one of the things people love about him." "It is," I agreed. But I added, looking at David with a newfound appreciation, "There's a lot to be said for quiet strength, too, for thoughtful observation." A faint blush seemed to touch David's cheeks, though it was hard to tell in the moonlight. He looked down for a moment, then met my gaze again. "Thank you, Angela. That's a kind thing to say." I felt a warmth spread through me, a genuine sense of having connected with him, of having seen him, perhaps for the first time, as a complete individual, not just as Mark's brother. And in turn, I felt seen by him. He hadn't judged my emotional outburst meant for his brother. He'd understood it, validated it, and even offered comfort and insight. There was a mutual respect blooming in the cool night air that was surprisingly profound. "I should probably let you get some sleep," I said, though I was reluctant for the conversation to end. It felt like a rare, precious thing, this unexpected interlude. And I should try to do the same. "Probably." David agreed, though he didn't make a move to leave either. He looked up at the sky, a canopy of brilliant stars stretching endlessly above us. "The stars are particularly clear tonight. No city haze up here." We stood in silence for another minute, side by side, looking up. It was a shared moment, peaceful and easy. The earlier awkwardness felt like a distant memory, completely erased by the candidness and empathy that had followed. "David," I said, turning to him, "thank you, really, for not making me feel like a complete idiot earlier, and for talking with me. You've given me a lot to think about, in a good way." He met my gaze, his eyes holding a sincere warmth. "There's nothing to thank me for, Angela. I'm glad we talked. And for what it's worth, I've always admired your patience and your strength in dealing with his Markisms." A slight smile played on his lips. "He's not always the easiest man to live with, brilliant as he is." I laughed, a genuine, light-hearted sound. "No, he's not. But he's worth it." "He is," David echoed softly. "And he knows it. He knows how much he relies on you, even if he doesn't always say it." Those words were like a gift, settling something in my heart. To hear it from David, who knew Mark so well, meant more than he could probably guess. He finally straightened up from the railing. Well, I think I'll turn in too. Early start tomorrow if I want to get some fishing in before the lake gets too busy. Good night, David, I said, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find tonight. Sleep well. You too, Angela, he replied, and with a slight nod, he turned and walked quietly towards the screen door, his silhouette disappearing into the deeper shadows of the cabin's interior. I stayed out on the porch for a few more minutes, alone again, but not feeling lonely anymore. The moon was a little higher, the stars a little brighter. I thought about the conversation, about the easy way David had diffused my embarrassment and opened up a space for genuine sharing. It was a lesson in human connection, really. How sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most meaningful insights. I had come out seeking my husband, burdened by a quiet worry, and instead I had found a different kind of understanding, a deeper appreciation for my brother-in-law, and a renewed perspective on my marriage. The night I mistook my brother-in-law for my husband, well, what happened was a quiet revelation, a reminder that connections can be found in surprising places, and that sometimes not being stopped, being allowed to be vulnerable, can lead to unexpected grace. I went back inside, my steps lighter, my mind clearer, feeling a sense of quiet gratitude for the unexpected turn the night had taken. The path to understanding Mark, and perhaps myself, had been illuminated from a surprising direction. And I knew, somehow, that my relationship with David had subtly shifted too, moving from polite familial acquaintance to something warmer, more substantive, built on a moment of shared honesty under the quiet watch of the stars.